But, that was, I think that was healing to go through those steps with him, as much as I knew that it was going to be a goodbye. But I think the hardest point was we were fighting and fighting to keep him going, and he was doing really well. Like he was bad in the beginning, he was excellent in the middle, and then it was bad again at the end. And I think that second time, when it was close to the end, he had only a few months left or a few weeks left. We had gone for an appointment, and they had said that it spread and it was in his brainstem and that it wouldn't be long. And, we got home, we went to get a burger, the two of us, and then we ate, and then he said all the things he wanted to say to me. And, that was the toughest time, because you kind of felt like the fight's over. Now we just need to accept that this is going to happen.
Hey there, it's Suzanne Oshima, life coach for women in midlife, and your fellow sister on a mission to empower and inspire you through the twists and turns of midlife. I'm here to help you transform it into your best life with the Life Is Now, Do It While You Can podcast. We only get one life, so let's make it count, and I'm super excited to dive into this new journey together. Welcome, everybody, to the Life Is Now, Do It While You Can podcast. I'm Suzanne Oshima, and I'm a life coach for women over 50. And today we have a very special guest, Janet Fanike, and she's the creator of Resilient People. And today we're talking about how to build resilience through loss. So welcome, Janet. I'm so happy to have you here and have you share your story.
Hi, Suzanne. It's nice to be here with you and your listeners. Thank you.
Yeah. So I know this isn't easy for you, but can you share your story about how much loss you've gone through in the last 5 years?
Sure. So in the last 5 years, I have lost my 51-year-old husband, my father, my mother, and then my 25-year-old daughter, who had just passed away in November of 2024.
Oh my goodness, that's heartbreaking. So can you take us through the journey of when this all started?
Sure. So back in 2016, when I was 47 years old and my husband was 47 at the time as well, we shared the same birthday. He was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer, a type that is called glioblastoma. And it was shocking, to say the least, because he was a healthy guy. He had a very busy career, traveled a lot. And, to make a long story short, with his diagnosis, it was we were heading off to the US Open the next day. And he was advocating for these symptoms that he had. So he had some screening done. And the news was not what we were expecting to hear. So he had surgery 2 weeks later, and then for 3.5 years on and off, he was in treatments, and he passed away at 51 in February of 2020. And then a month later, everyone will remember what happened because we all experienced it. It was the worldwide pandemic. So my kids and I, who at the time were in grade 9 and grade 12, like everybody else, were forced to be separated from everyone that loved us and we loved. And so it was an interesting experience to go through grief at the beginning of the pandemic. And I mean, what we all know now too is that so many lives were lost during that time, where people, weren't able to be with their loved ones at their bedside. And, there are many more experiences that we can think of that were really, really heartbreaking. Ours was, of course, heartbreaking, but then I kept turning to the news and thinking, oh man, I can't even imagine what that would have been like. So, and then my dad, a few years later, he had chronic health issues. He had passed away in May of 2023. And then a year later, my mom had passed away after having a year's worth of aggressive lymphoma. So in all these situations with the three of them, I was caring for them alongside with my brother. And it wasn't easy. It was really hard. And, it was really tough to, be helping my dad in and out of hospital while my husband was getting his treatments and not doing well at times. And then, when you kind of feel that reprieve after you lose someone, especially after they've been very ill, it's really tough to all of a sudden be kind of launched into another caregiving role, which is what happened with my mom, because it was only a couple months after my dad had passed that she was diagnosed. And that was really tough. And then she had passed away in July of 2024. And again, you have that feeling of, okay, I can breathe. The elephant's off my chest. They're gone. It's sad, of course. But at the same time, you kind of start thinking about the things that you've sort of had on the back burner that you'd like to get to. And I'm a big person who believes in leaning into the in-between moments, because I've experienced so many tough moments that I feel like even when you are caring for somebody, when you have those moments where nothing is going on, where things are kind of quiet, where things are sort of still, there's no drama happening, do something fun, do something joyful. So this is kind of where my mind was going after my mom had passed. I thought, okay, here are like 3 deaths that have happened in a pretty short amount of time. So started planning some trips and, just doing fun things. And then I got a call at the beginning of November of 2024 from Japan, where my daughter was living at the time and working, that she had passed away. And that to me was just beyond everything else that I had experienced for the few years before that. So, a friend of mine will say to me, life just isn't fair. And you just have to wrap your head around that. And she's right. Like even the pragmatic side of my brain will believe that. But at the same time, I think, man, we do everything right in this life. Like my family is, we've done fundraisers, we've helped people, we've been good. It's how does this happen to our little family? But the reality is that you just have to accept that it has, and you just have to do something with it, and you have to figure out a way to move forward. And that's kind of where my son and I are at right now. And as well as, of course, our family, because they grieve along with us.
Yeah. But, and first of all, my condolences for all the loss that you've gone through. I can't even imagine. I mean, just one. I mean, I've lost both my parents, but not a husband or a daughter. And I can't even imagine all of that coming at once. So how did you though, like, let's start with your husband and how, when he passed away, how did you go through the grieving process and how were you able to honestly get back up, right?
So I think I would say it started from years before that. I think my parents had raised us to be very self-sufficient and very independent. And I think, when you do that for your kids, you're really giving them life skills, because you're sort of preparing them in a lot of ways for figuring things out on their own, on how to deal with things. So, having said that, you get married, you have all these dreams ahead of you. I mean, we had 2 beautiful children and, life was good. And then when Adam was diagnosed and he shared that news with me on the car ride down to the hospital, because he asked me to bring an overnight bag for him. And then that's when he got the news and I just pulled aside and we had a good cry and then I was by his side and, he was sharing his room at the time with an older gentleman who was there for back surgery, and his wife was there quite often. And I'd said to Adam while we were hugging, okay, look, we know what this is now. So let's just build the best team we can around us and just deal with it. Because we can't do anything about the diagnosis and what this is, but we can do things for ourselves to really empower us to get through this. And that meant interviewing the medical teams that we would be partnering up with. And we really felt strongly about that word, being partners with them. Finding doctors and and their teams who would allow us to ask questions, give us the time in clinic. It was really important to have that. We did a lot of research and, like even just in our personal lives, making sure that the people that were going to be around us were going to be super supportive. And whether that looked like you were just a really good listener or you were somebody who was really funny and could make us laugh, those were really important. They seem like little things, but they were big things.
Mhm.
And so those were some of the ways in the beginning that we approached this whole thing.
And how did you, because I know that not everybody can be supportive, and it's not that they mean to say the wrong thing or, ask kind of some weird questions. I've had that happen. I have cancer, and when I was first diagnosed, people asked some weird questions.
Yeah.
But for you, how, like, did you just say, you know what, I need to put these friends or extended family members on the back burner, or did you cut ties? What did you do? Because no one wants to have conflict and when you're going
No,
through all of this.
no. Well, I think, being quiet for the first while really helped because it helped kind of crystallize who was really coming around that was really being helpful.
Mhm.
Um, there's this um, there's this thing called the ring theory, which I read about and I thought, oh, that's kind of like what I'm trying to do. So, you've got the person who's, got the issue in the center of the ring. And then you build these rings around that person. And in each ring, like the one ring that's around them is their closest people, like the people that they can really, you know, confide everything to, cry to, what have you. But that person never shares back with that vulnerable person. They're sharing out. So it's always this thing of no one is saying anything to the person who is going through the problem, but that person is using all those various rings to reach out to. So the further out the rings are, the further away that contact is. But I
Mhm.
felt like, listen, I have a dog, I walk her regularly. That was a godsend in many cases, but in some cases there would be situations where I'd run into somebody. I mean, I can give you a prime example. I was walking her and a car stopped right in front of us. And it was a woman that I know from, the area. And she said, Janet, oh my God, I just heard the news. What's going on? I mean, what does this mean? And it was just her whole approach was just jarring for me. And I kind of felt like, you get those, I'm sure, Suzanne, you can remember when you were going through it too. You kind of feel like they're the looky loos, they just want to kind of know what's going on,
Yep.
right? They don't necessarily want to be helpful. And
Mhm.
you get a radar that becomes pretty, um, you hone in on those things very um, quickly. At least I felt I did. So, I mean, I don't have like gazillions of friends. Some people might look at my life and say, man, she knows so many people. But when it really boils down to the people who I confide in, it's pretty small. So, and it's not to say, hey, to a person who's, asking too many questions, I can't talk to you or whatever. You don't need to be rude. But at the same time, you just say, or, they'll often say, oh, let me take you out. Let me go out. Da, da, da. No, it's okay. I've got my friends, thank you so much. I appreciate the offer, but we're good. Right. Like there are kind ways to kind of let someone sort of be at a distance. But I think you need to have those healthy boundaries because if you start, with, oh, I need all the people around me, that you're going to learn very quickly that will not be what you need.
Right. Right. So, when people again, I know people mean well, but when people did cross boundaries, how did you handle it?
Well, they wouldn't get a call back for a while,
Hmm.
and people can, look at that and say, oh, she's just really busy or, what have you. Um, you know, we're so blessed to have so much technology. if it comes down to, like somebody's caller ID popping up, not answering the call, messaging back rather than calling. It was rare that somebody would just pop over to the house, like really rare.
Yeah.
But, for those times, as the caregiver, especially for my husband, you know, it would be like literally just poking my head out the door. Like, because sometimes people want to have a look at him, even. Well, what's going on with him? What does he look like? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so, you're kind of the gatekeeper to your home. Um, for me too, it wasn't just like, keeping my own head above water, but it was also, and his too, but it was also the kids, making sure that they were okay, that they had somebody to talk with, and that their schools were checking in on them. So making sure that I was, regularly in contact with the head of each school or their homeroom teacher, just to say, this is what's happening. They're with you, way more than they're with me. So please, if you see anything that's out of the ordinary, please let me know, or check in with them every once in a while. Like, you need those eyes where your people are when you're not there.
Do you think that you became more resilient because you have children, because you had to be resilient for them?
I don't know. Honestly, I don't know where that, power comes from. I think you just, as a parent, you just jump into action. I mean, my mom, was Eastern European, she came from, parents who were immigrants. And I mean, you just got things done, right? Like, it was just that mentality. And we were raised with that too. I mean, there were many lines that she would say, like, it's just, well, listen, there's always somebody who's got it worse, like,
Mm-hmm.
and, even in the situation where, we got a terminal brain cancer diagnosis, I remember her saying that to me, but then, I mean, boy, I would say back, well, you know what? Yeah, I get it. There's lots of stuff happening out in the world, but this is my worst right now. And I'm just going to own it, and I'm going to deal with it. And I'm going to let people know what's going on. Like, that was the empowerment too, is I had a neighbor, she's passed on. Her name was Kay. And she saw me sweeping in the driveway. And, it was those little things too that I tell people, like, sometimes you need a break. Like, if your person is watching TV for half an hour or sleeping or whatever, go do something that it takes your mind off of whatever's happening in your house. So if it means you go for a walk around the block or what have you, listen to music on your back porch. But in this situation, I was sweeping. And she called me over, and I thought, oh God, I do not want to be talking with anybody right now. But she's so lovely. So I walked over, and she said, I heard what's happening. How are you? And I said, oh yeah, I'm okay. I'm okay. And these were early days, right? Still, when I would be telling people, yeah, I'm fine. And then she said, you're not fine. It's effing shit, is what she said to me. Yeah. And then she said, listen, Janet, I'm going to give you some advice. Don't go telling people that it's okay. Be honest. And from that moment on, that's what I did. And I tell you, Suzanne, that was probably the best bit of advice that I got in all the situations that I've gone through, because I think once you're transparent, the stories that come back to you and the help is so much better than you trying to figure it out on your own on how to deal with this, whatever thing that you're going through.
Oh my goodness. That's it. When you were saying that, I was thinking about women in general, and honestly, people in general, how we're programmed to say, when someone says, how are you? I'm fine. I'm okay. And even when we're really not, right?
Yep.
And it's funny that the neighbor who you didn't really want to talk to, she actually gave you a huge life lesson, and it made things better for you in the situation that you were going through.
Completely.
So then you just told people what was really happening. And at first, was that harder for you and how you were feeling?
No, because I think it just gave me license to just be free with this, because I felt like it's just too much. Like, this whole thing, especially with Adam, because I'd never gone through anything like that before. Like you get married and you think that it's going to be for the rest of your lives, right? And
Yeah.
then when it turns out that it's like cut halfway short, you think, well, okay, I got to figure this out. So, because, as a caregiver, and most caregivers would say the same thing, you're kind of mission control for everything. Like everybody's coming for you for everything, like information. How's he doing? How are the kids? What's going on? When's the next appointment? And like you're trying to like scrape together a minute or two to yourself just to kind excuse me, a minute or two to yourself just to kind of, get your head screwed back on. But yeah, you just, it's like a lot of people say to me, you just got to figure it out.
Yeah. Now, after he passed away, how did you go through that grieving process and how did you begin to start healing?
So we were very fortunate, even during the pandemic, for having people drop over to the driveway, having a coffee on the stoop, checking in regularly. And, once we were allowed to gather even outdoors, because remember, there was that whole thing of, oh, they're going to call the police if they see that somebody's, walking, into your house or into the backyard that doesn't belong there. But so, just having that was great. We were also fortunate that we were able to have a huge funeral for him. So Adam actually and I planned that together. So, he wrote his own obituary. I helped him edit it. He had a video send off for people at the funeral, which was really something for, almost everybody there who didn't know that that would be happening. But, that was, I think that was healing to go through those steps with him, as much as I knew that it was going to be a goodbye. But I think the hardest point was we were fighting and fighting to keep him going, and he was doing really well. Like he was bad in the beginning, he was excellent in the middle, and then it was bad again at the end. And I think that second time, when it was close to the end, he had only a few months left or a few weeks left. We had gone for an appointment and they had said that it spread and it was in his brainstem and that it wouldn't be long. And, we got home, we went to get a burger, the two of us, and then we ate, and then he said all the things he wanted to say to me. And, that was the toughest time, because you kind of felt like the fight's over. Now we just need to accept that this is going to happen. And, but, having the opportunity of having a big funeral, and that the kids and I were surrounded by all that love, and his brother, and, my family and his family. And, like there are a lot of people that grieve, it's us for sure at the middle of it, because, proximity wise, we're all living in the same house.
Mhm.
But, when you think about like in your own life, the people that you love, like your best friend, and, like it's the thought of losing these people is really tough, as we get older. So, with the pandemic, it was tricky, but I mean, having, the times where people could pop over helped. Once, the kids and I had held a fundraiser for the organizations that really helped us, Brain Tumor Foundation of Canada and some of the hospitals, just to, help raise money for the soft programs, things like virtual counseling that was happening during the pandemic, printing of handbooks. There were a lot of things that we thought we can do something here that's going to help us to follow the light, rather than just be in that grief state. So that helped, because people really rallied around, small businesses, Toronto Maple Leafs, like they all donated things, and it was really great. And then when we got to a point where a little bit more time had gone by and we were able to leave the country, the kids and I had said, let's go back to Hawaii, where we went, the four of us, and have a family trip, and we can take a little bit of dad there and give him a bit of a farewell, while we're there on the beach. So that was helpful. I mean, there are little steps that we took, to help ourselves along. And then I started a podcast, and that to me was really, really good because it was helping me to kind of build this positive community around me and to learn lessons of, people who have gone through all kinds of different challenges in their lives and how they made it through. So lots of lessons for me, but then it was also like I wanted to take my PR background and share that with the outside world too, because a lot of people get stuck. They just don't know what to do.
Yeah, definitely. People get stuck and people fall into depression. So, how did you stop yourself from falling in depression, or did you fall into depression with all of this, not just with your husband?
Yeah, well, I think, in some ways I'm still grappling with my daughter because
Mm,
that's been, the one that makes zero sense. And but I think with Adam, I started professional therapy. So, the hospital was able to give caregivers 6 sessions with a licensed psychotherapist, and he was with a psychiatrist. So I found that to be very, very helpful because it was somebody at the cancer center who really understood the challenges that cancer patients and their caregivers are facing. I did some group therapy as well that was for brain tumor patients and caregivers, but I found that to be a real challenge because the patients and the caregivers were in the same circle. So even though Adam didn't join me for that, it was really hard to see caregivers in some ways complaining about caring for their person while the person's
mhm.
sitting right beside them. And
Oh,
so, yeah, but I mean, listen, like people will take whatever they can just to kind of build that community, right? And then I made some friends through that. We'd meet for coffee. So, I mean, there were blessings that came out of that. Um, and then I continued therapy through our family practitioner. She was set up with a licensed, well, with a social worker who would do therapy. So the kids and I would go through that. So they had given us some really great tools for helping us through Adam's situation. Even before, like years before, when my parents were separating, when I was in my early 20s, I went for therapy. And it was really, really helpful. And it was just a matter of me bringing it up with my family doctors saying, I'm not sleeping. I'm really having a hard time sleeping. I get maybe an hour a night. And she said, well, what's going on? Like, just tell me what's happening. I told her and she said, I think you need to start talking to somebody. And so she set me up with a therapist. And, so I think like just remembering some of those tools that were started way back then and me being 56 now, I'm still using them. Um, yeah. So I think those have been very helpful. I've got a couple of people in my life who, I just share everything with them. And I'm having dinner with a girlfriend tonight, and she's been an amazing listener, but then she's also given me great advice. She'll wait until, I kind of say whatever I need to say. But then she's also probably one of the funniest people I know. So, that helps. So just having those people in my life that I can really turn to and they're just 1,000% there
mhm.
has been very helpful.
Now, what other tools do you draw on? Because you talked about on your site about how it's not just about being strong or being positive. Because I'm sure people said to you, "Oh, Janet, you're strong, and you're positive. You'll get through this," and that's kind of irritating to hear. I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, like you said, we've said this before, right? People don't know what to say.
Yeah.
So I get it. I get it, but it's not helpful. So, I think at the very least, conversations like this when they're out in the world and, when you read articles saying, well, that's great to tell people, like be strong, but the person needs to know how to be strong. Like, what are the tools? Like, tell me how I'm going to be strong through this.
Yeah.
So if it's doing kind of a curation of your friend circle, like who are the people that you can really point to, one or two, that are really supportive, that are very helpful. Keep those people on speed dial.
Mhm.
If it's making sure every day that you're doing something that has a little bit of purpose, like if it's, writing a to-do list every morning. Today, I'm going to wash my hair. Today, I'm going to wear those shoes that I really love. Today, I'm going to help a neighbor because I feel like, they might need a little hand in maybe sweeping their own driveway. Like it's just little things that you can do for yourself that will make you feel better. I mentioned earlier the fundraiser that we did. It doesn't need to be anything grand that you're doing, like, enough people have said, when you help others, you're kind of helping yourself. And so, just looking around you and thinking, what can I do to make myself feel better? If you're feeling run down, don't wait until your batteries are completely depleted.
Yeah.
Wait, if there's a moment where you've got things that are done, something else is kind of pending, but you can keep that on the back burner for another 10 minutes or so. Lie down, put in your earbuds, listen to some music, watch a show, sit outside. Like we're lucky, that you and you're in California, I'm in Toronto. The birds are chirping in the backyard. I love that. Like take a cup of tea and have that out there, like take in some nature, take pictures of flowers and, things that look beautiful to you. Like I think there are ways to build that resilience that don't need to be like you need to sign up for a course necessarily. That's wonderful to do that. But I think in the interim, when you're kind of feeling that you're struggling, there are little things that you can do for yourself.
Can you also talk about the guilt that you might feel when you're having a good day? Because did you go through that when you were like, oh God, I should be crying or I should be sad, but you were having a good day? How did you get through that and not feel guilty?
I didn't feel guilty because I did enough crying. Trust me. Yeah,
You're like,
I was not and I was the person years before who never cried. I would not cry over
mm,
anything. And then when Adam got sick and you just kind of see everything laid out in front of you that you need to deal with. It's overwhelming. And there were a couple times where I'd be lying on my bed trying to go to sleep and I'd be bawling my eyes out. So the moments that I felt like something was funny and I was laughing back at it, or I was putting makeup on and I felt good leaving the house, I did not feel guilty because I felt like I'm doing this for myself. And I felt like I was doing it for my children. I needed to show them that this is how you move forward.
mm, yeah. So do you I know everybody's different in when after people pass away, but for you, do you still talk to your husband, your parents, or your daughter, um, like, and just feel like they're around you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, when Isabel passed away, I would say that every time the sun came up, it was her. And, even at her funeral, it was interesting because, everybody gathered in the chapel. And then our family was ushered in last, just before the service was about to start. And everyone had said that the sun came out just at that time through the stained glass window that was in the front and it was beaming on us. And I thought, yeah, that's her. And then so you start thinking of like things as symbolism. And so the sun for her when Adam and my parents had passed, and even for Isabel now at night when the stars are out, the first star that I see, I think of them. And I just have a little conversation, sometimes out loud, sometimes not. Sometimes it's just quiet. Um, I'm a bit of a spirit animal person,
Hmm.
especially when there are unusual animals around. Like when Adam had passed, there was a black cat that was always visiting us, and we couldn't figure out who owns this cat. but it was the friendliest thing ever. And like I mentioned, we have a dog. So
Mhm.
this cat would show up on our front porch, have naps on our chair on the porch, would cuddle up to our legs and meow nonstop. And I would say, "That's your dad. It's your dad coming to see us." It's just, and it was comforting. Like those types of things I felt were really comforting.
Yeah.
And sometimes you even catch yourself thinking that you see them somewhere,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
That's a little bit alarming because it's like, oh, I wish you were here. But
Aw.
it's just not, it's not how it goes.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, just looking for the ways to bring yourself a little bit of comfort. But yeah, trust me, like on the thing about depression, I mean, I don't think anybody could go through a lot of trauma and a lot of loss and not feel depressed. But it's
Yeah.
just the way that you're just getting through it.
Hmm. You also mentioned, and I think this is important to share with the audience, you've mentioned before about it's important to be around like minded people who have gone through the same thing and are walking that same path with you. Can you touch on that a little bit?
So I can say I didn't know a lot of people who had a spouse with terminal brain cancer when we were going through it. I mean, I'd met some people, like I'd mentioned in group therapy, but you only get so close to some people. And then when Adam had passed away, there was a woman that I knew of, and I was going to pick up something from her business. And she said, "How's it going?" And I'm like, "Nah, it's not really great. My husband just passed away." "Oh my God, you're so young. What did he die from?" And I said, "Oh, he had glioblastoma." She said, "No, I have a friend whose husband passed away from that too. You guys should meet." And I'm like, "Okay." Like, and I'm not the type of person, Suzanne, who like just wants to pick up with somebody just because someone
Right.
says, "Oh, you guys should be friends," like,
Yeah.
especially as you get, older, it's like, "Okay, I've got my people. I'm good. Yeah, thank you." But
Hmm.
she persisted. She said, "I'm going to share your contact information with her." And, sure enough, this woman reached out. Her name is Cheryl. And we started talking. And I think the first time that we spoke, it was for probably a couple hours. And then we continued talking. And then, we see each other. She lives in another city and she comes here and we've gone away together. And, you know, it's not that we talk about brain tumors or anything like that regularly, but it was just having that sense of, yeah, you get completely what I've gone through. It was very helpful. It really was. And it continues to be, even though it's been, years later, we talk about all kinds of other stuff. We talk about her hair, we talk about shopping, we talk about, like food and shows. But, every once in a while that might creep up, an anniversary comes up and, want to talk to somebody about it. She'll call me or we'll just send each other a note. "How you doing today?" kind of thing. But then, at the same time, I got to say, there have been a lot of other people who had no idea about brain tumors or anything like that. And they were absolutely incredible at the support that they gave. Some people are just empaths, they just
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah, that's so true. Well, I'm so glad that woman insisted that you meet this other woman. So it was like you were destined to become friends
It worked
because,
out.
yeah,
Yeah,
and that helps you heal because there's a lot that you both just understand that can go unsaid with somebody that hasn't been through what you guys have been through. So
for
that's
sure.
amazing. It's important to get that support and be open to it, right?
Absolutely.
Well, Janet, I so appreciate you sharing your story. I know it's not easy. I'm sending you so much love from my heart, and just knowing that your husband, your daughter, and your parents will always be with you in your heart and soul.
Thank you, Suzanne.
So, Janet, can you share with the audience how people can find you?
Sure. My website's probably the easiest, resilientpeople.ca.
If you're ready to transform midlife into your best life, but you've been feeling a little isolated and alone on this journey, I can help you make new connections with like-minded women and create lasting friendships. Just head on over to SuzanneOshima.com and grab my free ebook, It's Never Too Late to Make New Friends.